Hey, good morning from sunny New Mexico. I have a few thoughts on the off-grid capacity of the new Winnebago FLX series campers. Let's talk about that in just a second, because I own a Micro Mini 2108 DS FLX series camper, and I've officially evaluated its off-grid capacity. Let's get into it. Well, it is a beautiful, absolutely gorgeous, sunny, albeit cold morning in the plains and surrounded by mountains of New Mexico. So if you're following along on my adventures, you know that I am living in the Winnebago, pulling with my Toyota Tundra 2013 Crew Max 5.7 liter. And we sold our home and we sold our business, and when I say we, my wife Joelle and I and our dog Watson, to live on the road and do photography and video and just do a nomad thing for a while to see where God's going to take us. And I'm in a wildlife preserve, and the geese they just seem to have like geese wars all the time and get mad at each other. So if you're hearing that, or if you're hearing the furnace, we're cold, so it is running. There's going to be a low rumble behind me for the entire video. But we stumbled across this Winnebago Micro Mini 2108 DS FLX series while looking actually for a North Trail Ultralight, which is what we were going to do. We hadn't intended on buying this rig, and when we went to the General RV in Florida, one of their locations, they had one of these, and the salesman showed it to us, and we decided it would be for us. So, as you know, I've done a lot of modifications to it, and you can see some of my videos in my RV modifications playlist. I'll put a link to that right here and some of the stuff that I've done. I wanted to talk to you specifically now that I've been out and I'm officially off-grid, and I've been off-grid for about 10 days, my thoughts on this trailer. If you're thinking about getting one, or perhaps if you own one, maybe it'll give you some ideas. So some of the things that I've done to prepare this for a full off-grid experience are in light of the fact that this has a Lithionics 320 amp hour battery in it. That's a heated battery, it's a smart BMS, and a low temp cutoff. I mean, it's great. But they're $3,800 on sale. So 320 amp hours, in my view, is not enough to run this off-grid for a significant period of time. Now, Winnebago markets these Flexes as a 5-day off-grid. I suppose they can be 5-day off-grid if you don't ever use anything on the camper that requires power. Beyond that, out of the factory, they come with only 380 watts of solar on the roof, and that 320 amp hour battery. It is not enough if you need power. So in that, what I've done is an option that Winnebago is now providing, because they've realized this, is they will sell you a second Lithionics battery to work in tandem with your initial 320 amp hour to give you a total of 640 amp hours of battery for $3,800. Now, we're full-timers, and I know a couple other people that are full-timers or build full-time campers, and they've recommended getting a second battery. Now, I've done some research, and apparently you don't have to necessarily have the same make, the same amp hours and everything, but I'm a little leery with the extreme precision that these Flexes are built with, of adding, say, a 300 amp hour battery that's not heated to my system, that's maybe one of the other makers. I can't think of the names of them right off the top of my head, that are fairly inexpensive. I can get into something like that for, $900, for example. But I don't want to wreck my system. So in light of that, because the batteries are so expensive, and I think I would rather try to do things before adding another battery if I'm going to add a matching Lithionics, which I may end up doing if the YouTube channel takes off and we have a lot of expendable cash. Right now, that's not the case. So what I've done is a few different things to try to help in an off-grid capacity, okay? I added a Renogy, a second solar charge controller. This comes with a GoPower 30 amp charge controller. I added a Renogy 50 amp MPPT charge controller, solar charge controller, that also is a DC to DC charger. So what that means is that will after I wired it from the truck using 4-gauge wire and some switches, some circuit breakers, when I plugged the connection into the truck, not the 7-pin, but a separate Anderson connector, when I plug that into the truck, when I'm driving, that pulls 25 amps of power, or around about 350 watts, off of the truck and charges the battery the entire time that I'm driving. There are also an additional 400 watts of solar panels that I've installed on the roof that are run in parallel. I added two HQST and 2 rich solar panels on my roof. So while I'm driving, if it's sunny, I get 400 watts of power, or theoretically, or 25 amps max from the solar and 25 amps from the DC to DC charge controller, with a total in theory of 50 amps. I'm seeing regularly maybe 40, 35 to 40. But I will say, when I left Lincoln, my battery, to get to Pueblo, I drove for 5 hours, and my battery was 100% when I left Lincoln to get to Pueblo, and I started out at about 40%. So fully charged, it takes about 3 hours to actually top it off from 40 to 50% to get it to 100% charged. That's a pretty good deal. So wherever I go, when I'm moving from point A to point B and I'm driving for a significant period of time to set up camp in another location, I can almost always be guaranteed, even if there's not sun, that I'm going to show up with 100% full 320 amp hours of battery. Now, one of the other things that I've done is, not only that, I added a 200 watt HQST, 200 watt rigid panel that I've kept loose. Now, this unit has a solar on the side port that you can plug up to 20 amps in, or 200 watts of solar in, but because it was wired improperly, I actually rewired that into the new charge controller. It was wired improperly from the factory to the Go Power, and it wouldn't work as well if it were hooked into the way that the factory wired them. So on the advice of the folks at Go Power, I rewired this 200 watt unit so that wherever I go, when I'm parked for more than a day or two, I can pull the 200 watt panel out and point that at the sun. So I'm regularly getting, if it's sunny, a significant amount more wattage of power. Now let me tell you my thoughts on the overall solar package. Yesterday, while I was here, I have 980 watts of solar total, with the panel out pointed toward the sun, and it is November, late November, so the sun is quite low. I'm getting, on a sunny day, almost the entire day, I'll get anywhere between 420 and 500 watts of solar total charging the battery. Yesterday, because I had to run my heating pads on the rig at night, I ended up with about a 40% battery. Last night I was at 87%. Now, one of the things that I've noticed with these units, these do come with heating pads on the underside. They use a lot of the battery. It didn't run the heating pads last night. It got down to about 29 degrees. So without the heating pads on last night, the heating pads were on the night before, and I ran it down to about 40%, charged it up to 87% yesterday by the time last night hit and the sun was down. Today, I didn't run the heating pads. It got down to 29 degrees. Nothing froze. I didn't have any problems. And it started out at 65% today. So I know for sure it's a sunny day with very little cloud forecast. I'm going to be charged up fully, certainly by midday, back to 100%. So with these rigs, with the amount of solar that I have, I feel pretty confident that I'm going to be able to maintain a consistent state of off-griddedness, if you will, indefinitely. The furnace does use some power when it's on high. The fridge in these uses a lot of power when it's turned on. And of course, I'm going to be using a lot of power when I'm running my laptop to make videos. But I think overall, it's pretty good. One thing that I've added to my arsenal is I added a Champion dual fuel 2500 watt propane run generator. It runs on gas too, but I bought it because I can run it off of propane. I'll use that in an emergency capacity. The maximum that I can use on that, because you can adjust your Xantrax inverter in these, the amount of amps it's going to draw when it's trying to charge the battery. about the max that that can handle is 75 amps. When I set that at 75 amps and it starts pulling off the generator, I can go from 40 or 50% in a matter of a couple hours and be fully charged on the unit, because it'll also be pulling from the solar as well. So I can get this thing charged up in an hour if I really, really want to. So overall, my thoughts on the rig are that it is being billed as a 5 or 6 day off-grid rig, the Flex series. I think that's wrong. I think that if they were installing that second battery and including it as part of the install, then yes, I don't think you'd have enough charging in the solar that comes on the rig. I think you'd have to add more. With the current state of the unit off of the factory, you can add another up to 190 watt panel. So if you added 190 watts or another couple hundred watts to the rig, if it had a second battery from the factory, I think in that capacity you would definitely be fine for a significant number of days. But Winnebago, if you're listening, this is just a field test. Again, you can tell folks that you're doing it for 5 days off. That is absolutely not the case unless you're just literally not using anything in the camper, or hardly at all. You're not going to be off grid for 5 days in this unit, even with perfect sun, out of the factory. You're just not. 3 at the most. 3, maybe 4. But if you had that second battery and a third solar panel, not doing the modifications that I've done, I do think, yes, you can definitely be, as I've proven. I've been out for 10, or maybe this is the 11th day that I've been out here. You can definitely be almost indefinite. I think I'll be able to be off-grid indefinitely. That covers the electricity and what my thoughts are related to the total electrical capacity, or that this unit can produce, and how many days it can be off-grid. The other component, of course, that you have to consider is definitely going to be your water. These only have a 31-gallon water, freshwater holding tank, and the black and gray tank are of equal proportions, and those are either 21 or 24 gallons each. 31 gallons of water for a couple, if you're going to be doing dishes, even if you only take showers once a week. It's not going to last you for a long time. I have yet to figure out exactly the length to put that to test, but I think that 5 days would be pushing it. What we've done is we always, as you know, I upgraded my water tank with regard to the bracing. So we'll travel with it half full anyway when we're going from point to point. But then whenever we know we're going to get somewhere, like before I got here, I filled the tank up at 31 gallons and drove a few miles to get into here. So I've got 31 gallons in here. I have come up with and devised a couple of solutions in dealing with this lower water. A lot of your fifth wheels will have 100-gallon tanks or 60-gallon tanks. Fifth wheels are much larger, of course much more difficult to tow, and not as off-grid or off-road as what mine is capable of being. What we've done is I have added to our inventory 3 of the 7-gallon utility water jugs that you can buy at REI or Walmart. That gives us an additional 21 gallons. So now when we get to an off-grid spot where we're going to be, say in Utah, 35 miles from civilization, we'll have 52 gallons of water. That's ample. That's perfectly fine. Now, what these tanks do, if we have these portable tanks, if we go to a place that is like a quartz site or an Imperial Dam Long-Term Visitor Association managed by the Bureau of Land Management, we're off-grid, but water and dumping stations are real close. So what we can do with the portable tanks is, because we're unhooking the truck, we can take the 3, get 21 gallons of water, bring it back and fill up the tank, take a couple more, one more trip and come back, and our tank is topped off and we have spare water. I think that that's a solution that's inexpensive to solve the water problem. I don't typically try to travel with it full like that, but we'll get, again, 31 gallons somewhere, and then like even here, Maxwell, the town is only just around the corner, like 7 miles from here. So if I ran out of water, it would be very easy for me to get back what I lost by just driving into town, filling up with gas, and using their water station. Using any of the apps like RV Parky or iOverlander or Campendium, it's pretty easy to source water. It's not too difficult to source water, even at a rest stop. So if the black tank or holding tank for sewage gets full, another solution that I devised is I found this 6-gallon portable dumping tank. With this, worst case scenario, this is only the worst case scenario, I can take this tank off the back bumper from the rig. I can set it down. I have a little tiny short hose with an elbow, and I can release some of the fluid out of the black tank into this small portable tank that you see here. The nice thing about this is if we're in a place where we need to get it unloaded or at least reduced, we might find a place that has vault toilets like where I'm at right now. Well, we can take this is a 6-gallon holding tank. We can take 6 gallons of fluid off of the black tank, and we can then take it over to one of the vault toilets, dump it in, and that easily, 6 gallons of solid waste type thing, like a cassette toilet, it's a 5-gallon. That lasted me personally for at least 5 days when I was living in the van, provided you do everything you can do to try to find, like here, I use the vault toilets to go to the bathroom, should I need to, instead of using my black tank. Black tank only when absolutely necessary. So that is how I've resolved the freshwater holding situation, going from 31 gallons to 52 gallons in theory. The tank's getting full is really not going to be an issue for me. I don't like using the little portable tank. It kind of can be messy if you're not careful, but it'll work in a pinch. And I think it's a good solution. I didn't get one of the giant tanks that you'll see on people's ladders because I don't know how you would dump that. I don't know how those are dumped. I don't know if they have a pump on them or what, but I don't want to be pumping it either. So I feel like this is an easy, I can carry it, 6 gallons, it's not heavy. It also has a handle and wheels, so if I want to, I can roll it down the road to the dump. So these are my thoughts on the overall off-grid capacity with regard to these Flex series, whether it's the 2108, I don't know what they're, like the bunkhouse TBS or FBS, or the 2108 DS, which maybe stands for dinette system, I'm not sure, but any of the Flex model campers. These are my thoughts on how long you can go off-grid. I think I've proven out without spending money on the additional battery. I mean, I spent $450 on the generator, $250 on the DC to DC converter, with all the connections and everything, $350, so that's $700, $800. The solar panels, I spent an additional $300 plus this one, so that's $500. I've got $1,300 into it. $1,300 into what I've done, or round figures, $1,300 into all the additional solar, the DC to DC charge controller that I added, and all of the wiring, because I bought copper wiring, solid copper, and it's expensive. So $1,300 in, compared to $3,800 for a battery that I'm not convinced would be charged efficiently, and I think you would still have to add the DC to DC charge controller and at least another 200 watts of solar to really get the system charged back up if you had the 640 amp hours. I'm not sure. But for now, I've been off-grid for 10 days. I have yet to hook up to shore power, and I've yet to go below 45% on my battery, even using the tank heaters. My thought on the tank heaters is if I can get around using them, I don't want to, because they take the battery from 100% down to 40%, in the next morning, no question. And if you're using tank heaters, you're using your propane heater, and that's pumping out the electricity like crazy too. So I think it's best to try to avoid all of that if we can get around it by chasing warmer weather. So I hope that this review, or this sharing of my thoughts and experiences in this off-grid unit, this ability to be off-grid, is helpful to you if you're considering buying one of these, or if you own one. Some of the things that I've done maybe will help you to decide whether or not it's the right thing for you. For us, living in it full-time, it's important that all these things are functional and working the way that they should. I think overall I'm very happy with this unit. I'm looking forward to taking it around the country and honestly just showing you everything I can find with the beauty of America. So if you haven't already, please like the video. If you could subscribe, and then when you subscribe, hit that bell notification. when you hit the bell notification, you'll get updates for any of the videos or any of the posts that I've made that are coming out or have been released. I do all kinds of videos for RV modifications on my Winnebago 2108 DS FLX series. I do truck modifications, a lot of photography, a lot of storytelling with regard to landscape photography, and maybe some life advice thrown in there. I hope that you found it helpful. I hope that you found it encouraging. I hope that you found it inspiring. And by all means, if you have any questions with regard to what I've done on this unit, what product I've purchased, or if you have any thoughts how we could do things better, I welcome those in the comments section below. For now, that's going to do it for this video. This is Rob, and I will see you in the next one. I'm out.